If you are not a Tall Tales contestant, please take one. Now you will observe that the numbering and the categories are different on this ballot than on the last one. Your categories here are speech development, speech techniques, physical, voice, and appropriateness. On the back, it gives us a description as to what of that you need to pay attention to. Content, speech development, that's 30% of the value of the speech. Speech development is the way the speaker puts ideas together so the audience can understand them. A good tall tale speech immediately engages the audience attention, then smoothly builds up to a climax and a conclusion. Now the delivery is worth 55%, and that covers speech techniques referred to the use of various tall tale skills such as exaggeration, irony, pun, humor, and a surprise twist. These techniques are the essence of the tall tales, and they must be skillfully incorporated into the tale. Physical presentation of a speech carries part of the responsibility for effective communication. The speaker's appearance should reinforce the story. Body language should support the story through gestures, expressions, and body positions. Voice is the sound that carries the message. It should be flexible, moving from one pitch to another for emphasis, and should have a variety of rate and volume. A good voice can be clearly heard and the words be easily understood. Language, 15%, covers the appropriateness of the language, refers to the choice of words that relate to the speech purpose and to the particular audience hearing the speech. Language should promote clear understanding of thoughts and should fit the occasion precisely. Proper use of grammar and correct pronunciation will show that the speaker is the master of the words being used. Of course, our code of ethics still applies. Any questions?
Our first speaker with the title, Are You Home? Please help me welcome Bill Jeffrey.
On October 20th, 1947, I was born. And as usual, the birth of a child is a joyous occasion. But for me, it was more than a joyous, or for my parents, it was more than a joyous occasion, because there had been a family tragedy on July 7th when I could call it an extended family or even a clan was traveling across the country. And on July 7th, during a storm, there was a terrible accident, and 2 of our adult members and 2 children were killed. And this was very bad, of course, and there was mourning, and then when I was born, it was almost like the mourning period, they tell me, ended because a new child was born. Let me back up a little bit why we were traveling. Our family had been living, extended family clan had been living in the Pacific Northwest for a few years with a main compound or ranch, you would call it, just north of Mount Rainier. And it was a beautiful place. The people were wonderful. The climate was wonderful. But the family was finding out there was very little opportunities, particularly for the young people. There was no heavy industry. The schools, the colleges weren't close by, so they decided as a group to move. Just pick it up and move across country. And that's what was happening. The clan had gathered, and they were getting ready to move, and then they were moving, and that's when the accident happened. Now, if you remember your history, 1947, 48, 49, 50, the world was going quite mad, and it lasted for quite a while. We had invented and used the atomic bomb at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which was awful. But what was more awful was they then learned how to use that as a trigger to the hydrogen bomb. And they had advanced to the place where they were using terms like overkill and mutually assured destruction. Now, my family was concerned about this, as any sane person would be, so they said, can we do anything about this? I mean, is there something? I think I'd better back up a little further. Well, a lot further, actually. About 12,000 years ago, there was this island in the Atlantic Ocean. And you see, not remnants of it now, but you see the Sargasso Sea. And that was called Atlantis. And there was an advanced civilization there, not because the people were smarter, but because long before that there had been another cataclysm. And it wiped out everybody except Atlantis. It kind of wiped them out to the Stone Age. So here is Atlantis, several thousand years beyond the normal levels of civilization. And they had developed technology as a civilization does. And then they began to realize through their measurements, their geology, their astronomy, something bad was coming down the pike in 100 to 200 years. There's going to be another Earth cataclysm. So they got together, their scientists, their philosophers, their teachers, and wanted to know, can we do anything about this? We would like to survive. So they started talking among themselves, and they also sent out delegates or investigated teams. And, well, they didn't find much, except for this old man, crazy man, really crazy, in the middle of the desert, beard. He's got his farmhands working the land, but he and his sons are building this really big thing. And they said, well, what's going on to him? Because they had learned the language, and he said, well, the earth is going to be flooded. I'm building a boat, an ark. He said, wow, that's very interesting. So the light bulb went off in their head, and they thanked him and left, went back to Atlantis and said, we can build an ark, but we're not going to build a boat. We're going to build a generation starship. We're going to send some of our people and plants and animals to this other planet that we know about. We've seen it in the telescopes, and they did that. It took 120 years. A generation starship means you send people, they have children, they have children. So it took 120 or more years, ship time, but on Earth, because of relativity, took 3,000 years because of getting closer to the speed of light. They landed, everything was fine, they established a civilization, and things were hunky-dory for a while. And then they began growing. They didn't start at the Stone Age, they started with advanced technology. Pretty soon there was a population problem, and people started saying, what can we do? And somebody said, well, why don't we go back to Earth? Some of us anyway. Starships parked up there, right? So they did. And they landed, my family among them. Still human, these are all humans, these are straight humans. This is not alien stuff. And we landed early in 1940 and got established. There was a war going on. We just kind of stayed low because this was very hard to understand where these people, us, came from. Now they had studied, various people had studied, in the clan, had studied various things, including ancient languages, and they found one called the primal language. I'm going to tell you about this in a moment, but the primal language started in the New Stone Age, where people started communicating with sound, but it wasn't like language that we know it. It was more like animal growls that go right past the conscious mind and cause a deep reaction. Arrgh, that kind of thing. When you hear that, you're not thinking, why? So some of our people, my father being one of them, and another, well, all the adult males we called uncle, all the adult females we called auntie, except the father and mother. And all the children were called cousins. That's just simplified. So my father and one of the uncles were linguists, and they studied this. Now coming back to this it was about 1952, that they came up with this idea. They said, let us put together a primal language directive to get people to go to peace. But it's, you'll have to say it or hear it, and what will happen is that the peace will go right down to the core of their being, and they won't even know about it, except they'll start to become more peaceful. They said, well, how do we get it? You know, are we going to buy broadcast time? No. Another uncle was a writer, script writer for Hollywood. Said, let's put it in a movie. So they wrote this script. And the real reason for the movie and the script was to produce one line that would be on in the primal language on the theater. And the movie was When the Earth Stood Still, the original one with Michael Rennie. It had nothing to do. Everybody's saying, oh, this is a peace message, and it was. But the message, the real message was at the end of the movie. Gort, Klaatu, Barata, Nikto. That is primal language. And when you hear the first word, Gort, is cut it off. Because if you keep hearing grrr, you get anxious. But if you hear grrr, it's like, pay attention. You know, your whole being comes up. Klaatu is the person addressing you. So if it says grrr, Gort, Klaatu, it's basically, I'm speaking to you. And that was my father's name, by the way, Klaatu, in the clan. Barata means, according to their research, the soul and listen to. Ba is actually an Egyptian. It's a word meaning soul, one of the several words. So soul, listen to, and Nikto means peace, or if you want peace. So Gort, I'm speaking to you at the deep level. I, Klaatu, if you want to have peace, listen to your soul. So the movie was put out, great, wonderful. And things started happening. The Cuban Missile Crisis was the peak of it. 3 minutes we were from nuclear holocaust on the planet, and they backed off. And then we noticed after that, because I was getting old enough to notice this and being on the councils, that we had no more. Everybody hated each other still, but we didn't wipe out the planet. And we had 3 or 4 close disasters, but they were all technological failures. So we knew that was pretty good. The thing worked. Gort, Klaatu, Barata, Nikto. And my father, Klaatu, and another uncle took some time off, went to Egypt, because they're linguists. They're still studying ancient languages. And they went to Karnak, one of the temple compounds, and other places. And they went to another place, the temple of Bastet, or Bast. He said, Ba, there's that symbol again. They're looking on the wall. They're looking. And one of them says, you see that? Yeah. It says, Barata Nikto. That's the primal language. Apparently these Egyptians had gotten or kept as part of their heritage some of the primal language. Except, this was the temple of Bastet, or Bast now, and that's the cat goddess. Sometimes you've seen cats around there, and there's this woman with the cat's head, and the word Ba in Bast or Bastet means cat. So now the translation of Barata Nikto means, if you want to have peace, listen to your cat. So, and I am now, my father died, and when the fathers died, they passed the name on to either the first blood son or an adopted son. So I am Klaatu. So I say to you, if you want to have peace, listen to your cat. Gort, Klaatu, Barata, Nikto.